Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road journey. This week I've come to Berkshire, a county that's mainly the M4 motorway. It's peculiar in as much as it's quite a wide county but not very long, a chode county, and contained within we find such delights as Bracknell, Reading and Slough. It's interesting actually, because if we take a look at a map of Berkshire, we notice that Slough is very much bolted onto the side, and that's because until the 1970s, Slough wasn't part of Berkshire and was instead part of Buckinghamshire. But they were having none of that. After all, who wants Slough messing up your crime statistics? So Slough was offloaded to Berkshire. They already had Reading, Maidenhead and Bracknell, so no big deal really. To navigate our way around this beautiful county, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and yes, in the days of my guidebook, Slough was very much part of Buckinghamshire, but we're going to ignore that completely because it suits my narrative far better, so let's crack on. And today's journey takes us from Slough to Reading, and whilst that may not be a huge distance, there's plenty to keep us busy, so come on, let's have a look. We start then with Slough, which luckily, because my guidebook thinks Slough is in Buckinghamshire, means it offers many things to see or do that don't involve going anywhere near Slough. But big news, I think I've found a typo or maybe a copyright trap in my 1923 Michelin guidebook. The guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Leatherminster Library, which is found in a suburb of Slough known as Langley. But it's not Leatherminster, it's Kidderminster Library, founded by Sir John Kidderminster in 1613. It is sometimes referred to as Kidderminster Library, but it doesn't really matter, the guidebook is wrong. The library is contained within St Mary's Church and retains a lot of its original features, and indeed it houses over 300 items that date back to 1638. But the oldest book in its collection is the Missale Romanum that was published in 1485. Venturing into actual Slough, and one of its features is the Slough Trading Estate. In the days of my guidebook, it had only recently opened, and it came about because of a bit of a government cock-up. In 1917, during the first small disagreement, it was decided that a centralised vehicle repair depot was needed with good transport links and within a short distance of London. At the time, Slough was probably a very nice little town, but that all changed when the site for the repair depot was chosen as Slough's farmland. The thing is, the government longed it out, approving the plans in May 1918. Construction on the site would begin later that year in July, only for the first small disagreement to come to an end 4 months later, making the whole thing a waste of time. Still, they pressed on with the construction, and by 1919 the site was fully operational. To begin with, old war vehicles were repaired at the site to be sold for a profit in an attempt to claw back some of the money that the government had put into the site, but this didn't last very long, and the site was then sold to a mate of the government who set up Slough Trading Estates Limited. He would then expand the site and it turned into a far more professional outfit. An interesting fact is that one of their workshop buildings covered an area of 8 acres and could house 15,000 vehicles, and at the time this was the largest facility of its type. No, I can't quite believe I'm making a video about Slough's trading estate either, but anyway, let's move on, and the plan is to head down to Bracknell. Can't wait. But first we're going to stop by the town of Maidenhead, since it's just next door to Slough and simple to get to via the A4, which is still the same as it was 100 years ago. Heading into Maidenhead, and the A4 crosses over the River Thames via the Maidenhead Bridge. It's not a particularly large or impressive structure, but it's clearly been well put together because it was built in 1777. For many years, the bridge operated as a toll bridge, costing £16 to cross over with your horse and cart, but the tolls were abolished in 1903 following a legal challenge where it was discovered that the funds being collected were being used for other purposes other than maintaining the bridge, which was highly illegal. At the time, locals gathered at the bridge to remove the toll gates before throwing them into the River Thames below. As you cross over Maidenhead Bridge, keep an eye out for Maidenhead Railway Bridge, an impressive brick-built structure designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. It opened in 1839 as the largest brick-built arch bridge in Europe, a record which still stands, but at the time most thought the bridge wouldn't, and its design was heavily criticised, with most thinking it would immediately collapse. It turns out though that Brunel bloke knew what he was talking about, and the bridge still stands 185 years later. Some River Thames-based shenanigans can be found a short distance from the bridges at Bolter's Lock, as recommended by my guidebook. In those days this was more of a luxury holiday resort, or at the very least a very pleasant way to spend the day, where you could go on a boat trip or wander around Raymill Island. What I'm interested in though is the no longer in use boat lift. Sure, there's a massive lock here to allow for larger boats to traverse the river, but that's a lot of work to operate, and what if you're in a small rowing boat that you've just hired for your pleasant day out? use a lift. It was quite simple really. You'd row your boat up to the lift, it would catch your boat and then pull you up to the top via a set of wooden rollers where a couple of canal types would scoop you up and deposit you back into the river. It's not exactly clear as to when it closed, but I think sometime between 1915 and 1920. The area that once housed the lift is now used as a manual slipway with no trace of any mechanical equipment left. For some reason, in my mind, it's a good idea to leave the luxury riverside resort and head on to our next destination, Bracknell, which is not a luxury resort. If anything, it's a last resort. To get there, we'll start on the A330, which takes us past a field where a very friendly horse lives, and if that makes no sense, add this video to your watch list. We'll then take a right onto the A3095, which will eventually deposit us into Bracknell. In the days of my guidebook, Bracknell was nothing more than a small village if you ask me. There were only around 2,500 people living here. Now there are over 115,000 people living here, but I don't really know why. Maybe they moved here because Bracknell is allegedly a place where there are more roundabouts per square mile than any other town in the world. Quite the accolade, but are these roundabouts any good? No, not really. Bracknell was designated as a new town in 1949, although interestingly the plan was only to ever have 25,000 people living here. It seems that they just didn't stop building. In the mid-1990s, the town centre was regenerated due to its age, making Bracknell New Town a new town, although I don't think it made any difference. An exciting proposition can be found to the west of the town by way of an abandoned ski centre. And you're right, there aren't any snowy mountains in Bracknell, instead are small mounds that used to be home to a dry ski slope, which is a bit like skiing on upturned garden brushes. It was known as the John Nike Ski Centre, and it started as a garden centre built by Leonard John Nike on the site of an old brickworks, but Leonard had greater ambitions and turned the site into a big hotel and ski centre. The main building that housed a 2,400-seat venue and ice rink was demolished in 2022, and all that remains is what's left of the ski slopes and the lift gear. But do take a look next door at the Copped Beach Hotel. It was built at the same time as the ski slope but has managed to avoid closure. Its design is supposed to mimic an alpine lodge, and it looks very out of place. On the other side of the motorway and a short distance from the Copped Beach Hotel is the town of Wokingham, a town that's grown in population from 4,400 in the days of my guidebook to over 55,000 today. And that's all I can tell you about Wokingham. My guidebook has no suggestions on interesting things to see or do in the area, and my research has uncovered nothing of interest either. So if you've got any idea as to what 55,000 people do in Wokingham all day, please let us know in the comments. Wokingham's a bit of a waste of time then, so we'll head out of there via the A329 and hopefully we'll do a bit better at our next destination, the town of Reading. With a population of 95,100 years ago, it must be a productive place, unlike Wokingham. Indeed, and my guidebook mentions that Reading is noted for seeds and biscuits. I don't really care about seeds, but I do biscuits. Where are the biscuits? Let's go get some biscuits. According to my guidebook, we're looking for Huntley and Palmer's biscuit factory. Unfortunately, there's nothing left of it, except for the building that you can see behind me. This one, not this one. It all started in 1822 as a small bakery on London Street in Reading. Things went well, leading to expansion and a much larger biscuit factory opening in 1846. By 1900, Huntley and Palmer's were employing over 5,000 people and were the largest manufacturer of its type in the world. The Reading factory would close in 1976 because it was too old to be modernised without considerable costs. It was cheaper to just open a new factory elsewhere, which is exactly what they did. Sadly, it wasn't in Reading, and most of the factory has now been demolished, erasing all trace of this huge industry that would have once kept Reading in business. Just around the corner from the old biscuit factory is Reading Gaol, which I've since learned is pronounced jail, so it's Reading Jail. It was built in 1844, which perhaps goes some way to explaining its elaborate design, but looks can be deceiving, and it certainly wouldn't have been a nice place to stay. It was deliberately laid out to keep prisoners isolated from one another, and the area out front would have been used for public executions, the last of which occurred in 1913. But it's the building itself that's of most interest, and it would seem many agree with it being granted a Grade 2 listed status in 1978, which is quite peculiar because it was still open and operating as a jail at the time. The jail would close in 2014 following a government order. There wasn't really any reason as to why the jail should close, it just did. A year later, in 2015, the government attempted to flog the site for housing development. We're now struggling for prison space, I hear. Probably don't close them all then. In 2021, some horrible graffiti appeared on one of the walls of the jail, apparently done by some bloke called Banksy. It's since been preserved and the council have installed no less than 4 CCTV cameras to keep an eye on it. In 2024, Reading Jail was sold for £7 million to an overseas buyer. I imagine the graffiti put the price up a bit. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care, bye bye.